Well, here we are on the second of the series then, the watercolour, having done the acrylic, this time the two fishing boats on the beach. As you see here, I've got this rather fun applicator for putting on the masking fluid. I'm very impressed with it. It allows me to do dots and lines finely in far more controlled manner than with the brush, so I would certainly recommend this. It can be purchased through the SAA website or the Society of All Artists. And as you can see here, you can do the lettering, the fine work, the dots and dashes on the pebbles, and even the fine lines on the side of the boat. I always choose the blue or grey colour masking fluid because it's easier to see against the white paper, and when this is dry, as you see now, it's even bluer. And once it's dry, it rubs off very easily, leaving a perfectly white paper surface. Here's the palette of watercolours I tend to keep in, which will do almost everything, but I haven't included the turquoise here. I add that at the end of this list so you can see them more clearly. You may notice I don't use black in watercolour at all, not even Payne's grey. I will use indigo and I will use Prussian as my darkest blues, and by adding burnt sienna or burnt umber to those, I can make my very darks. Right, I'm ready to go ahead with this watercolour now, and I've got my stuff set up. You see, I've already used the masking fluid and got that prepared. In using the masking fluid, I was using this new one which I've got, which has a thin needle through the nozzle, which you can just squeeze on, and I've managed to do these little dots with that, which is rather fun. So you're using a small brush, and also it draws very fine lines. So I'm quite impressed with that and would recommend it. I have got special brushes as well, but this applicator certainly saves a lot of work and gives finer detail. Got my jar of water ready, my full set of colours, a sponge here for doing texture as well, special textural brushes like that one. I'll probably only need a couple of round brushes and my oval mops today. I'm going to start with the sky here and use the oval mop. You need to just wet the watercolours first to damp the surface down. I use tube watercolours squeezed into a palette, so they need dampening up before I start to use them. Right, first of all I need to just dampen up the watercolour. I'll use one of the oval mops. I like these Pro Arte oval mops. Very, very useful. Just go around just putting water onto the surface of the watercolours. Not too much, but just to dampen them down so that as soon as I touch them in the future, I'm going to be able to take paint out. And the first colours I'm going to use will be this lovely turquoise, which I've recently come across. That's going to give me this beautiful turquoise of the sky. Then we're going to go down to the pea green sea after we've got that finished. And looking at this sky, we've got these lovely white fluffy clouds. The darks of the flags, of course, are put on at the end. And I want the clouds to have plenty of light to them. So I'm going to need a little bit of tissue paper as well, just to bring out the lighter shades in a moment. Right, I've got my tissue paper ready here, and I'm going to put on a little bit of raw sienna first, where the lighter areas of the clouds are. A little bit of raw sienna just to give me some yellow into the cloud, and then a little bit of grey into that in a minute. And these cloud areas are here, so I'm going to just blend those in and drop in some of these little bits of grey first, the fluffiness I want, just to get these light areas with the clouds. So raw sienna, not yellow ochre. I prefer the raw sienna. It's got more luminosity to it. I'll leave little bits of white just showing in that, the top edges. Bring that down through here, right the way along the bottom edge here, this straight line here. Don't want any white left on that lower edge. I'm going to drop a little bit of pink into that in a moment and just bring that up here, fluffily into there. Now a little bit of cobalt violet, I think, into that. I've got the paper at a very slight tilt, you see, remembering that always the watercolour is going to dry lighter than the colour you're putting on. So we've got this slight greyness to it now. Don't want to come below there. Just pick that, those little bits of pink now come into the other clouds. Not too much. So I know it'll dry lighter anyway. Little bits of this pink coming up into these clouds, just light, fluffy. Keep it wet, don't want it to dry out too much. There we go. Now I'm going to add a touch of cerulean to that, same mixture, so the cobalt violet with a little touch of cerulean, which will just give me a slightly greyer tone down here, give me that nice fluffiness, down here, up and through into these clouds here a little bit, and then I've got that done, you can start on the turquoise. Now I want my tissue, I'm going to just dab back some of the lighter areas of the cloud here, just a bit, bits of light to the clouds. Now my turquoise, nice clean brush, touch my turquoise, clean area on the palette, and I want it very light at first, so I'm going to come in here. We'll put that fine thin wash into here, leaving little bits of white showing, letting that just blend in at the edges here, right through, down into the cloud at the bottom as well a little bit, so we get this mottled effect, which watercolour will give us beautifully here, right through, down into there, through here, around the tops of these clouds. Nice fluffy white through there. A little bit stronger with the paint now. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment into it as I come up, so a little bit stronger. It's very thin at first because I want it very light. A little bit stronger now. And use the tissue again just to lift a little out here. Now, back in again. This time I'm going to use some of the cerulean, which is slightly warmer, and just come into that, up here, a bit more cloud up this way. So now I've changed to the slightly warmer blue. Now normally this would have been the coolest blue I had, but this wonderful new but with this wonderful new turquoise, things have changed a bit in life, and we can now get these lovely effects. And then slightly warmer still into my cobalt at the top here. And we'll bring some of that lovely warm blue, warmer blue, down into here to give the effects of the atmospheric sky. And let that just trickle down through. I'd like to have lifted out a bit more of that, but it's not going to come, I don't think. And a bit stronger up there. Now with a little more of the cobalt and even a little tiny touch of the ultramarine to really get this singing. And we just drop a few little bits of those deeper blue down into the background there. Get the feeling of the clouds going back further there, softly as it goes into the distance. There we go. I'm going to use my brush just to scrub out a little bit here, a bit more of the cloud effect, just trying to lift out some of that paint a little bit here. Just scrub it out a bit. It's meant to be a bit lighter. Just soften some of these edges. Don't want them too sharp in places, just softened at the edges. Same here, we'll just soften that back a bit. And then I want to make a very slight grey, so I'm going to take some cerulean there, There's a little touch of the ultramarine, cobalt I mean, a little cerulean, a little touch of cobalt, and a wee touch of burnt sienna. That'll give me a very slight warm grey, because I just want to feel underneath some of these clouds a little here, just to get the feeling of slightly darker cloud under there. While it's still wet, drop in some of these greys amongst this. Just make sure they're softened in again, not too hard. Colour again there, just drop them in around here just a little bit more. Just want to strengthen the blue in the sky just above here and around these clouds, just that fraction more. So I really do want to use this lovely turquoise blue a lot today. I think that's giving us that nice fluffy mottled cloud effect enough now. We'll let that dry off. Right, now we've done the sky, which is drying off, I want to come down to this lovely green here. In fact, it's quite like that turquoise in a way. I'm going to put a bit of that turquoise in a moment. But first of all, I just want to lay across. I'm going to put some turquoise on first. Again, it's a colour I obviously like. Right through here. Just a little bit on the top edge, all the way through. Then I'm going to take some aureolin yellow, which is one of my favourite yellows, and drop that in all the way across here into that and linking with it, because I want this yellow-green effect right down to there. And the aureolin yellow with the turquoise will give me that nice pea green that I was looking for. And again, I'm going to be slightly stronger than we expect, because we know it's going to dry lighter later. Right through there. With this paint, it stains a bit. So that's given us our nice yellow for the green to yellow. A little bit stronger there. And I'll go back to my turquoise again and drop a bit more of that in, so we get this lovely green shade coming across. The idea of sunlight coming across it. And then down there, a little bit more of that purple pink. So I'll take a little bit more of my cobalt violet and just lay that in across here. Those lovely soft tints. It's quite quick, this watercolour technique, you see. If I was out there, I'd be using just the same thing. I'd be using the same techniques if I was working out there, except that I probably wouldn't have used the masking fluid as much, although I would struggle. I'd probably have to use a bit of gouache or something like that to get this right then. And when this is dry, I'm going to go across this again here, just a little bit darker at the top edge. Down here we've got some deeper blue areas of shadow coming in, but again I'll let it dry before I do that. While that's drying off, down here I'm going to come back to my raw sienna again and give a very thin coating of that over everything here, absolutely over everything. Except for the objects that are painted on the beach, of course. Even in the shadowed areas, let's not worry about that. A little bit of texturing I'm going to leave behind. A little bit of dry brushwork here and there on the gravel, even though I've got little bits of light from my masking fluid. I'm not that worried. That wants to be a brighter yellow there, so I've got to leave that behind. Not leaving a vignette on this one, I'm going right up to the edges. Right, that gives me my base coat for putting all the texture on shortly. I shall work my shadows over this. A little bit of that cool cerulean I want into the boat here. The shadow part of the boat, the lighter area here, the white. and then into that I shall take some of that warmer colour, just drop it in if it's reflecting from underneath the boat. That's also coming up around the gunnels here. Get that in, and there's a little bit of that warmth coming over the top here of this in places. Again, let that dry off. Now this is something I don't often do, but I've decided this time that it would be nice to put a second wash onto here. I'm going to take some more of this because I'm really into this turquoise at the moment. Take a bit more of this turquoise and just drop it over the top to make an even stronger and slightly harder edge around these clouds here. So I'm taking a second time, and now this is called a glaze. A wash is when you just put one colour on. A glaze is when you go in again, as we're doing here, and drop in a transparent coat over an existing. So we get a harder edge to these clouds slightly. It just gives it a bit more dimension. So again, right over to here, come round these, down into and around here, right up through here. It's just giving me another dimension to the picture, just making it a little bit darker in places and just bringing these clouds out a little bit more. Through here, down and through here. I may soften those edges just a bit in a moment. We'll just come in and there we are. That's just given this feeling of a slightly, because the watercolour dries so very light, doesn't it? So that's just taking it down that fraction more, and right down to the horizon as well here, just to give it a bit darker against that horizon, to bring the sea out. Now with a bit of water, we'll just soften back one or two of these edges to a little bit sharp yet, to get that fluffy effect. There we go. Now, I want to start looking at the texturing down here, and of course we've got the sea to finish, which is now dry enough. So I'm going to take a smaller brush now. I'm going to move down to one of my rounds. This one will do nicely. And I'm going to take a little bit of Prussian blue and put next to it a little bit of cobalt, because I want to glaze over this area here around the boat. I want that to be quite dark just here. It goes up into a triangle like that. So right across this, and this is also called a glaze because I'm painting this transparently over the existing green. And again we use a little bit of dry brushwork just to drag it over there. As if the sea is just sparkling a bit there. When it comes up to the boat it's a bit stronger. Sparkling a bit there. Make a bit more of it. A little touch of the Prussian into it. Just dragging it over the surface to give us a sort of speckly effect. Thinner. Wash it down just a little bit, drop it in around the figure here. That's wet into wet now, and I'm dropping it there. Now I also want to use that quite thinly across the top of this, the horizon here, just where the sky meets the sea, and the same going on over this side, but very thinly, nice and light. Quite careful with my brush, all the way through here to meet up with that. I just glaze that down a fraction, just softening that edge in. I shall do the same up here now. Take some water and just soften, blend that edge in. Okay, let that dry off. Now whilst that's drying we can start to look at some of the colours here, so I'm going to go back now to my wash brush, a larger brush again, and let's look at the lovely blues we've got going on down there. Now that's quite a strong blue, and it starts off with a bit of turquoise here, reflecting from the sky around that edge there, and then it comes down quite quickly into the cobalt, right through here, right down to his trousers. I want them in as well in it. I'll see why in a moment. And up that side of him, down through this arm, that links to that boat here, and there, through there. Can bring that blue all the way through. Now all I've got to do is make that a little bit stronger where I need it. Here for instance, a lovely strong blue, lighter there and stronger here on the shadow. Coming through that bit. Quite strong blues. This is the beauty of this particular picture. It's one of the reasons I chose this, is so this lovely blue that's coming through. And then we go into the ultramarine. Beautiful strong blue ultramarine coming on down here. And then right down to the Prussian. That really is very dark. I'm using it almost pure from the palette now. And I want to go even darker still down here, so I'm going to add some brown to that Prussian, do a bit of purple as well, some burnt sienna, get it really dark look, almost into black, that shadow there, very dark. Beautiful darks, right up and round into the little flow down here. And we know it's going to dry slightly lighter, but that gives us that. Now back onto him, because he's quite dark into there, and I want to drop that dark into his trousers. Just let the action of the watercolour do the work. And whilst that's drying, we'll come across to this boat. Let's look at the blues on that. Different blues altogether, and in fact we're starting off with that lovely cobalt violet again here. So I'm going to take some of that, place that all the way along here. It's my underpainting again, and around here. You might not think that that light blue there is cobalt violet, but once I start getting other blues in, it will make more sense, I hope. Bring that cobalt violet as a glaze right through to give the warmth again. Up into here. There we go. Now I want to start on the blues on that. And a little touch of that turquoise coming in here to give that cool effect against the pink. Strange colours you might think to mix, but I think you'll see it'll work in a moment. And then the rest of those planks have to be done with a glaze again, so I've got to let that dry off a bit now. But while that's drying I can be putting in this stronger shadow here again. So a bit of purple, Prussian, and the brown, burnt sienna. Let's look at this really lovely dark here that comes up all the way along there in one stroke down to here, comes up right along the bottom of this gunnel, some thwart, put it on our brush, it's going to come into the shadows under here, along these planks. In fact, I do want to soften that back a bit, so I'm going to just drag a bit of it out again. Now there we go. And into that I want to go very dark with the deep blue again. Deep blue and the brown. Up into here. And let that spread down there. The beauty of watercolour. Now, whilst I'm doing this and the sky is dry, I'm going to take some ultramarine blue, come in here to the flags, nice big strokes, come in there and start to feel these broken edges of these lovely flags here. I'll come back with a smaller brush to do the poles later, just to get the basics at the moment. I've started off with the ultramarine because I want a transparent blue showing through more behind here. Just turn my brush into a blade now because I want to squeeze that brush into a blade. I want to get a feathery edge to this. Now we'll take that very dark Prussian, a little bit of the warm, a wee bit of purple, and drop those into that. Now I've got some students arriving, so I'll have to stop for a minute, but you get the idea. I have to start working on the blues on the side of the boat here, and to do that I shall use a round brush. So we need to paint these in the shapes down the planks. The glaze is a transparent colour that goes over another, and the undercolour shows through, and a wash is the colour that goes on first of all, your primary initial coat. And we need to just get this cerulean blue I'm using now, quite different to that turquoise. And now into that a little bit of the cobalt, just dropping it in. Give it that depth of blue. And a bit of dry brushwork over there. And voila, that part is done. Right, now I need to start painting in some of the lighter colours. And we've got a lovely yellow box here. I'll take a small round brush and just take my aureolin yellow again. And we'll just paint that in with the aureolin yellow right over. Here again I want some of that cobalt violet on the top. And then down around it we'll go for red. We'll have a bit of rose coming around. On that side of it, little purple into that red. In fact, we'll even use a little bit of alizarin to really give that a glow there. And next I want to start on some texturing, and this is going to take a lot of work. Before I do the texturing, I'll just paint this yellow funnel in. Right, now it's time to start on some texturing, and I'm going to use this little brush that I've chopped down as a texturing brush, and I'm using a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to twist the brush and keep going round and round and round here, gradually doing this texturing all the way across everything, because I'm going to put a wash of shadow over this later. But we're going to keep putting on and more and more and more of this texture by twisting the brush So we get large and small pebbles, and I'm going to use the sponge later as well. But this way I get lots of different sized pebbles, right up to the edges, right into the distance, smaller marks, so it's pressing slightly lighter into the distance, through to the edges of the paper. Remember, don't make them all the same, do twist the brush slightly so you get different sized marks, all the way down around him. Try not to leave halos around anything, in other words, do make sure you go up to edges. Now I want some more sienna, raw sienna, more golden colour. Starting with that next. You can see it's just starting to come together now. Remember that the blue dots on here aren't in fact paint, they're the masking fluid, so I'm going to need some blue in there. I'm going to go into that in a moment. While talking about the blue, this is a good time to mix some up. I'll take some ultramarine and put it with some of that darker colour I had earlier, the Prussian, and we'll just start to dabble in blue into this as well. Now let's see what we can do by using a little bit of sponge. Mix up a colour with the sponge. In this case I want it to be a bit redder, so we'll take some of the rose and a little touch of cadmium, and we'll just see what we can do with that. Just get it onto the end of the sponge nicely, and we'll start to put some of these warmer colours into the... So the brush was good, but equally now we can use the sponge to get the sponge effects for the... And of course these warmer colours help to bring out the cooler colours of the boat. Now I guess that's given me about enough for the gravel effect. Maybe a few more darks. We'll just take a bit of purple and blue. We'll just use a bit of purple in there as well amongst these. Put a bit of sponging onto the boat that I don't really want. I'll just take that out a bit with a damp brush. We can start to come back into more detail. Now the shadow under here, that paint is dry. We'll take some purple, a little touch of ultramarine, and we'll use that as a glaze to paint in this lovely dark shadow that comes under here, deeper still actually. A little bit more brown into it. There we go, let's try that. So a lovely deep shadow that comes in here, right round under the boat, up under the, through and out. There, all the way down into there, around here. And as it comes down it gets a bit bluer, so a bit more ultramarine, and that is a much bluer shadow coming out here. Bluer there as well. Same thing with the shadow over here. Shadow behind the box, and here, and a lovely deep purple shadow coming right through, purple blue shadow right through here and off the front of the boat there. Bit of that larger brush, take my smaller round. I need to come back front of the boat here, find this deeper colour that's coming up, and very carefully start to pick out these lovely planks. Now it's time, it's dry, to wipe off the masking fluid and do the final stages of this painting. So all these little bits of lines that we put on earlier will bring out the sparkle. And we've got our white back without doing any painting of white. And then some of this light area is going to need taking down a bit with light tints of colour. You can see here the little bits of white on the surf. I use a handkerchief to take this off normally, or a cloth, because it comes off easier. And there's all our sparkle of colour back. Right back into here. And that's it, ready to do the final stages. So, go back with my wash brush and a little water, and we just want to take down these tones just a bit. Even by just dragging the paint across, we can do that, look. Just to take the starkness off the white. And I want a little bit of texturing on there in a minute as well. Come back with some warmer colour into there in just a moment with a smaller brush. A little bit of yellow onto his head there, just to darken it down a bit in the sun. And a little bit of warmth here and there here as well. And tone these down a fraction as they blend in here. That feeling of roundness. Bit of texture on that plank. And we'll just take those whites down a bit by just dragging some water across, so that the starkness of the lights becomes to the shadow. Now we just need a little bit of dry brushwork across the lettering, so just dragging the brush over here, edge on, just to give a scraped effect to these letters. Got some little nails going all the way along here that are rather fun. I'll better put those in. The plank's just going through too. Now my textural brush again. I'm going to take a bit of the yellow, just wash some of that. It's fairly transparent. Just take some of this white down a bit. We aren't far off finishing. Now I just need to put a few more warms in here and there, like these sorts of places. And we'll just find a few more darks. And maybe a tad of green here and there. A few bits of grass maybe. Just to brighten things up and to show the warmth. I'll put this in the colour circle again. Here we are, I guess we can call that one as far as I want to go with it. Oh no, I've got to missed out a nice bit of rope there, I can't be doing that. There's a lovely bit of rope that comes down here, comes through there, and right round here, down like that, curves up from there. Let's just do that before we finish off. That's going to want a nice deep blue shadow underneath it. And when that's a bit dry, we'll just go back in there with it. A little bit darker. Right, now go back and just get the feeling of this twisted rope. Little tiny strokes showing the rope curling round here. Just give that little extra dimension. The skeg on this boat. These little fine things to finish off with. And that gives you another version or way to paint this, doesn't it? The sailing boat just there.